guys, it's Bren. Welcome to my Friday night. It's super exciting. I have no social life lately since I'm not dating anyone. I should do a video about that because in my Q&A on my other channel, I got a lot of questions about like, you know, what do you do to make friends in your 30s now and all this stuff, and like, I don't know. I'm just hanging out with you. No, I mean, I actually have plans tomorrow night, but they're like super pre-planned plans because all my friends have like kids and stuff now. So, anyway, but I figured why waste a perfectly good Tallgrass Blueberry Jam beer and a perfectly good The Rocket Summer t-shirt not doing a YouTube video tonight. And so I figured I would kind of pick up where my story left off with Nick. So I'm a little out of order as far as telling you my great love stories on this channel because I kind of explained everything, but I also talked about my marriage. Then I jumped forward to Josh. Then I jumped back, but not all the way back because there was this gap between my marriage and Nick that I didn't talk about. And maybe someday I'll go back and I'll talk about that. But now I'm going to try to move forward in time. And so tonight I'm going to tell you about all the guys that I dated during the summer of 2013 when I really started online dating. So Nick was the second person I'd ever met online. There was another person that I met at the end of 2013 who I will tell you about in a separate video. But tonight it's going to be all about in between. I just like went online, man, and I would like go out with anybody who asked me out. And so there are a lot of like little stories here too, but there were a few guys that left a little bit of an impact on me. The first guy I dated after Nick was this guy who seemed perfect on paper. So perfect. He was 6'5". He had a good job. He had a nice car. He was nice, and he lived in Madison, my favorite city. I mean, I couldn't have like written down a fact sheet that would have been any better. But the problem was on our first date, we just talked about, you know, like our pets and our jobs and the weather. And then on our 8th date, we still were just talking about our pets and our jobs and the weather. I felt like I could not connect with him on like a deeper level. He really didn't have much of a personality. I don't want to bash him or anything. He was a nice guy, but he just had like no life experiences to talk about. He had lived like this very average, like normal life with like no drama, no issues. He was, at the time, I was 31. And he would have been like 31 or 32, is the same age as me. And he had never had like a big breakup, he said. He had never had a serious relationship. He said everyone that he'd ever dated, they just kind of like faded out. And I didn't know how that was possible until that's what happened between us. And I realized it's because he doesn't really have much of a personality. I would try to tap in by asking him like very serious questions. So I'd be like, you know, what's your biggest fear? And he'd be like, spiders, you know, like very generic, I guess. But I kept trying to make it work because he seemed like everything that I would want. You know, he was the kind of guy my mom would have been like, yes, in fact, I think she was like, be with him. And I was just like, but I can't because I have all this deep emotional stuff going on inside of me. Like I'm so emo and I'm going through like 3 heartbreaks at once. And I just, like, I felt like I would never be able to like actually open up to this guy because there was just nothing, I mean, and so I think, you know, we just sort of like, I remember that I went out with him 8 times. For some reason, I remember that number, but then just like didn't talk again, just kind of faded out. But funny story, jumping way ahead into the future, just a few months ago when Josh and I were like in some crazy like fight and had stopped talking and what he was running around with Iowa Girl or something, I hopped back on Match.com and I saw this same guy from Madison on there still, and I wrote him. I was like, hey, you know, I think I said something like, I hate to see you on here still. You were such a nice guy, you know, and he was like, he wrote me back and he was like really excited to hear from me. Hey, Bren, yeah, no, don't feel bad. I actually have been in a couple serious relationships and I like to think that I've grown a lot as a person in the past few years, blah, blah, blah. And so we started chatting and I was like, that sounds great. You know, maybe now that he's had like some life experiences, he's gotten a little more personality, and I was actually really excited. We decided to meet up and I went up there to hang out with him. And at first we were like, hey, like we were so excited to see each other. And then it just, within like 5 minutes after we actually sat down, I remembered exactly why it didn't work out. I couldn't, like there was just no conversation. Like there was it was so awkward. It was like pulling teeth, like trying to find words to fill the awkward silence. Like once we got done talking about the weather and our jobs and our pets, none of which had really changed all that much. It was like, so you had like a sister, right? How is she? Like, as you know, it was just, we just couldn't connect. And I could tell that he was disappointed too. I wonder what he would say about me because, you know, to me, I just couldn't tap into him. But I could tell that he was also disappointed when we met up again, that we just didn't, but we didn't. Neither one of us talked to the other one after that. But going back to 2013, there was that guy, there was this one guy that got real serious on me really quick, and on our first date, he kept saying things like, so who's going to move to be with who? He lived in Milwaukee. Am I going to move down there? Are you going to move up here? And then he would talk about like, so you know, I've got 2 cats and you've got 1. How are we going to get them to get along? We're going to have 3 cats. And I thought he was joking, so I'd like laugh. But I really don't know that he was joking, and we didn't really have that good of a time. But when I declined politely his offer for a second date, he got real weird. Was like, can we still be friends? And then he would still text me all the time. And if I didn't answer, he would be like, I thought we were friends. And honestly, had he been a woman, he would have been labeled like stage 5 clinger, super crazy, and all this stuff. Instead, it was just kind of odd. And then there was my buddy Zach. Zach is his real name because I'm not going to bash him at all. He's one of the nicest guys that I know, so I feel like I probably don't need to change his name. No, I met Zach, and he was going through a lot of stuff. We were both in like an emo place. He had gone through a breakup, but also his mother was dying of ovarian cancer, and she was at the point where, you know, she wasn't fighting it anymore. It was going to take her, but she had like a few good months left, you know, and so it was just a really hard time for him. And then he met me, Miss Emo Breakup Queen, who was like trying to get over Nick and all of this. And he and I started talking online, Zach, because he was a ghost hunter. And I thought that was so cool. I just wanted to know more about it. And he was a legit ghost hunter. He had all the equipment and he had a crew and he had a YouTube channel. And actually, very recently, they filmed like a real pilot for a network. And like he actually does this, and I thought it was really interesting. Some of my friends made fun of me at the time. They were like, you have to date him because no other girl will, which is not true at all. I thought it was really neat, but that's why I started talking to him, and we started Skyping, and he really loved Andrew McMahon too. That was the other thing that we really had in common, was he loved Andrew, and I loved Andrew, and so we talked a lot about that, and we made each other mixes, which is kind of a theme you'll see. I do the mix thing a lot with people because music is such a big deal to me. And so it's funny because I got to know my ex-husband on AOL Instant Messenger before I met him. I got to know Nick on the phone really well before I met him. And Zach I got to know on Skype. We would Skype every night. And then we finally decided to meet up. We did. We had a really good time. And then he came to see me after that, and we went to an Andrew McMahon concert. It was the first time that I saw Constantine live. I almost died. I did cry. And I got to share that with Zach. And then there were a couple more times that I went to see him. But he lived 2 hours away in the Quad Cities area. And his parents had an in-ground pool. And so he would work on Saturdays, but Saturday during the day, because I'd go for the whole weekend, I would hang out with his mom at the pool. And it was actually really fun. And I'm really glad that I got a chance to know her because she was a really cool lady. But by the end of the second time that I went to see him, so like the 4th time I've hung out with him total, Zach just, we got in a little stupid fight about something, and he was like, look, this just isn't going to work. We're too different. And he was having a lot of, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this if he ever finds out, a lot of anxiety. For good reason. I mean, he had a lot going on, a lot. But he kind of just wanted to stay in. He didn't like going out. He didn't want to be social. And he knew that I was a person that did like to go out and do things and go to restaurants, go to bars and be social. And he just couldn't deal with that at that time. And so he broke it off with me, and I had to leave, and it was like all this crying and I'm never going to see you again and all this stuff. But I tell you what I got out of dating Zach was that he was a kind person. He was genuinely, a better person than I. They say that everyone, even like prisoners, if you ask people to rate themselves on if they think they're a good person or not, everyone will say they're better than average, which is obviously impossible. Only half of people can be better than average. But Zach, he is at the top of the scale as far as just being a kind soul. And I think that, the past serious relationships that I'd had, a lot of those guys were not like total jerks, and they were never jerks to me. I'm not the kind of girl who's attracted to a guy who's going to be a jerk to me. But I think in general, like, my ex-husband was kind of cocky, and then the next guy that I dated for 3 years sort of thought he was better than everybody else. And Zach was so nice and so humble. It really made me like learn and know that, okay, I need to find someone who has this quality moving forward. And this was the best breakup that I've ever been through. And it is because Zach did not follow that notion that when you break up with someone, you need a clean break and you should never talk to them again. Like the guy I dated for 3 years who I was getting over when I met Nick. Like, he had just been like, we're done, and then that's it. Like, he wouldn't answer my calls, he wouldn't answer my texts, he wouldn't talk to me, I had no closure, I had no idea what was going on, and that was horrible. Zach, on the other hand, I could talk to him anytime. You know, I left his house crying, and he was adamant. He remained firm that we were not a good match as a couple. But he would say, you know, I'd say, like, I miss you, I'm having a hard time with this. And he would say, you know, I know, but you're such a great person, you're awesome and everything, but you and I don't work. You know, he would stay firm, but be nice. And then after probably about a week, I figured out that I needed the space from him, that I needed to stop talking to him to get over him, and I did. But he let me come to that in my own time, and that was really nice, and it worked out really well for me. A few months later, he messaged me about, he was also super creative. He wrote music and poems and everything else, played a lot of instruments, and he wrote me a few months later looking to see if I still had this poem that he had written me because he wanted to turn it into a song. And I did, and I sent it to him, and he did turn it into a song, and he sent it to me, which was really awesome. But it didn't feel like, oh, here's an ex of mine writing me a love song. Like, it didn't feel weird. It just felt like, that's really cool. Like, as a writer, I can understand that sometimes I'm going to dig down into my past and look for things to write about, or I guess that's kind of what I'm doing now with this YouTube channel too, right? And it doesn't mean, like, just because I'm talking about Nick, for example, that I still have feelings for him. I don't. But I could appreciate the creative process that went into that. And we did, like, meet up for a drink, like, at some point months after we had first talked, after his mom had passed away. She did eventually pass away. But now we're still Facebook friends, and every once in a while we'll talk about Andrew McMahon or something. He was engaged for a while, but then he wasn't, but now he's with a new girl, and he looks really happy. He's got all this stuff going on. So he was a cool guy. I'm glad that I know him. It's one of those things where, you know, there's not many of those people I met on those online dating sites. Am I glad that I met them? Because obviously it didn't work out. But he's someone I'm really glad that I did meet. And then there were some other real bad ones. There was this one guy who was very rude to me the entire time. I could not drink my one drink fast enough. And then after I left, I was like, oh, I'm glad that's over. And then I ran into him at the gas station on the way home. Like, what the heck? That was awkward. There was another guy who I also think is a really nice guy. But at the time that we went out, first of all, I agreed to go out with him, and then he told me, oh, by the way, I don't have a car. Can you come pick me up? Okay, and I did. But then the whole time, all he did was, like, bitch about his job. He hated his job, and I just remember he just was talking about the job. I was, like, texting my friends, like, oh my God, this guy won't stop talking about how much he hates his job. And then he said something that made me, like, come up with a story. So I was like, oh, I have a story like that. And I was just about to actually start talking for the first time that night. And then he got a call from work. So he excused himself to go out and take the call. And when he came back, he wasn't like, oh, so where were we? What were you going to say? Instead, he was just like, you won't believe what they just told me. Blah, blah, blah. I hope that guy found a new job, really. And then there was probably a bunch of other kind of bad dates in there. In fact, I know that there were. But then I started talking to this guy who lived in Ohio. He could have gotten me test candles if I still knew him now, and I think about that often, actually. But no, this guy, I'll call him Steve. He wrote me a letter on, you know, an internet dating site that said, like, I've never really considered long distance, not that I'm necessarily opposed to it. I just couldn't help but email you because your profile is, like, the coolest profile that I've ever seen. And he started talking about music and stuff. Now, this guy had the coolest taste in music. He made me one of the best mixtapes and exposed me to a lot of new music. My taste in music is kind of crappy. I mean, I think Bryce is amazing, and I think Newfound Glory is amazing, and Andrew McMahon is clearly amazing. Okay, my taste in music is awesome. But some people think that it kind of sucks. But Steve had really cool taste in, like, indie music, and he was really up on indie and everything like that. But also, he loved writing, and I loved writing. And so now, after getting to know one guy on Instant Messenger, and one guy on the phone, and one guy on Skype, Steve and I got to know each other through emails. We wrote each other huge, long, like 5 pages, single-spaced emails back and forth, and he became my pen pal. I started referring to him as my pen pal from Ohio. And I actually took all of our emails and copied them and pasted them into a Word document at one point because I thought that they could actually be like a pretty intriguing novel someday, and they were well beyond novel length. Together, Steve and I wrote a novel, a long one. And we started talking about romantic history and relationships. I told him about my 3-year ex. I told him about Nick. I told him about Zach. I told him about all these bad dates. And he told me this really epically long saga about this girl that he had dated throughout like college and beyond, on and off, and all of this stuff. And at first, when we were emailing back and forth, he was very flirtatious with me. He made a joke about how his last name rhymed with Brenda, and he was like, we might have a Julia Gulia situation on our hands, you know, and other things like that that would indicate that he was thinking about the possibility of dating me. And then, I don't know, he sort of stopped doing that, but I was developing this huge crush on him. He told me that I wrote like Jack Kerouac, which was like, I mean, huge compliments. I don't know if he meant it or not, but he would always just say how much he loved my writing and he looked forward to getting emails from me so much. And I was the same way. Like every time I got an email from him, I was like, oh, and I would just stop everything that I was doing so that I could read it. And these were really long emails, you guys. I can't even stress this enough. We told our whole life stories. We almost did what I had done with Nick, but via email. And I admit I was kind of trying to recreate that. You know, I had really valued what I'd had with Nick, even though it turned out bad, but I wanted to kind of recreate that via Skype with Zach, and that didn't really work out. And then I think I was trying to recreate it via email with Steve, but it wasn't really going the same way. And one night, now, I had been listening to Steve's mix that he gave me constantly. Like, I was constantly listening to these 31 songs that he sent me. And when you're listening to someone else's music, and you're a person like me that music means a lot to you, it really makes you feel close to that person. So all the time that I was listening to this mix almost made me feel like I was hanging out with Steve, like I was getting to know him. And yeah, like I said, big crush. But I also was very intimidated by him because he was very, how do I put this? Upper crust, very refined, very poised, very white bread, preppy. You could just tell that he came from a very like rich family and very high class, I guess you would say. Not that I'm low class, but he was just intimidating like that. And I felt like I probably wasn't good enough for him. He was also a runner. And so because of that, I felt like we had everything in common except that. But that made me feel like he probably would want to date someone who was like really in shape because he was too. And that's not me. I hate exercising. But I actually, when I was talking to him, I remember like starting to try to like run more and stuff. And it just, but anyway, that was when I discovered I had asthma for the first time. But then I think I finally said to him at one point, you know, it's kind of weird. We've been emailing back and forth for like a couple of months, at least at that point. And we've never taken this outside of email. You know, I had given him my phone number at some point and he had never used it. So I told him, I'm like, I feel kind of weird about that. Like, I gave you my phone number, but then you just kept emailing me. Like, is there some reason that you don't want to take this outside of email? And of course, all my friends were like, it's because he's got a girlfriend. He's obviously like cheating on his girlfriend by talking to you and all this stuff. I don't really think it was that. I do know that he was like casually seeing someone because he was telling me that he had met some girl online, but he was telling me that like it didn't really work out and he didn't really like her. I don't know. But then after I sent him that email, he did call me, but it felt like it was because I basically told him to call me, but he did call me and we talked a little bit. And after that, he told me that he was going to be in Chicago in like a week. And I was like, what? You're going to be in Chicago in a week? And he was like, yeah, I've got a wedding. And then I found out that he was in the wedding. So then I was like, he's obviously known about this wedding for like probably a year at least because he's in it. And yet he was just bringing it up to me now 1 week beforehand when we've been intensely emailing for 2 months. And I wonder if that's because maybe he couldn't decide if he wanted to take that other girl with him or not. And if he was, then that would have been weird for him to meet up with me. But it was weird. But he asked if I wanted to meet up. And I felt like I had to. I felt like if I didn't do it, I remember it was the same night as all these other friends of mine were having this big party that they wanted me to go to, but I was like, I can't. I have to go to Chicago and meet Steve because otherwise I will always wonder like what would have happened if I had gone. And this is maybe my only opportunity because I didn't know about Bath Body Works test candles in Ohio yet. I was like, this is my only opportunity probably to ever be in the same city as this guy. I have to go. But the only time that he could meet up with me was like at 11:30 at night after the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding. That was it. And so we met at the Owl, which is in Logan Square because it's open until 5 a.m. on Saturdays. So there's a few bars in Chicago with that kind of really crazy late liquor license. And so I was so nervous because this guy was so intimidating to me and I had such a big crush on him and I felt like I had poured my heart out via email, and for me that worked almost the best. It was almost better than getting to know someone on AIM or the phone or Skype because I was a writer and that was the way that I best conveyed myself, and he loved the way that I wrote, which is just, he gave me the hugest compliment maybe of anyone ever in my life. And I was in love with his music, and he was tall. He was kind of cute. And I was just so nervous that I got there a little early and I downed a pint before he even got there, trying to take the edge off, right? But then as soon as he got there, he was just so refined and I don't want to say uppity, but just so poised. And I felt like some stupid drunk idiot. Like, I really felt like a sloppy, like, low-class person next to him. He was just so intimidating. I mean, he was really tall, so maybe that was part of it, but he just, you know, he had like everything about him was just like perfectly groomed and like he just, you know, and he had been at a rehearsal dinner. He should have been drinking too, but he sure didn't seem like it. He just made me feel so silly. And I tried to flirt with him. I remember saying something like, you have nice eyes, and then him just being like, thanks, and that was it. And then when the bill came, he was like, here's how much you owe. Like, he friend-zoned me hard. Like, guys always complain about, there's probably no guys watching this channel, but any guys who are out there, straight guys who might be watching this channel, and you always complain about getting friend-zoned by girls, I know how it feels now, because Steve friend-zoned me to the max. And I mean, I hung out with him a little while longer. I think we got food or something, and I just felt stupid. Everything that he asked me, I felt like I needed to come up with some super articulate professor-type answer for, and I couldn't. He just had that kind of presence. So I was very sad afterwards. I was like very disappointed and let down that I didn't have an experience with him the way that I did with Nick, where when we finally did meet up after getting to know each other so well on the phone, it was just like fireworks and explosion and awesome. I had been thinking that might happen with Steve, and it just totally didn't. And it took a while, but eventually I asked him about it. Like, why didn't, you know, did you, like, was it just because of the long distance or what? And he wrote back and said that, yeah, sure, a lot of it was long distance, but also he had just gotten to know me so well via email, and he had heard about all these other guys who had broken my heart that he just couldn't stand to put himself in a position where he might also break my heart. I really just think I was too fat for him, honest to God. I think he was kind of picky because I kept talking to him as friends after that, and he would go on to date other girls and then like talk to me every once in a while. We weren't talking as much, but every once in a while, I remember he called me to run something by me, and it was that he had been dating this girl, and they'd gone on a few times, and she wanted to make it like an official boyfriend-girlfriend commitment, and he didn't. And he was like, everyone just keeps telling me that I'm like afraid of commitment or that I'm being too picky or something, but I don't get that. And I was all like, I totally get that. Like, I totally agree with all your friends, dude. Sorry. Because he was looking for this perfect girl to fit in with his perfect family. I saw this picture of his family on Facebook. They all are wearing like sweater vests and looking perfect, like, and they're in a Gap commercial. Like, I had even told him after I met him that he was kind of intimidating, and he was like, a lot of people tell me that. I don't know why that is, and I couldn't describe it to him, just like I can't really describe it to you guys. But we just sort of faded out with our communication, and now it's been years and years since I've talked to him. We might still be Facebook friends. I don't even know. But yeah, every time I'm in Columbus, because he had moved from Cleveland to Columbus when we were talking, and so every time I'm getting my test candles, I'm like, Steve's here somewhere. Maybe I'll run into him. But yeah, so then that leads all the way up to this other really significant story that I have to tell you guys, which is actually going to be a huge whopper. It's going to be like dredging up more emotions even than talking about my most recent breakup with Josh. It's going to be a big one. I got to figure out exactly how I want to go about that and what I want to say, but I'll stop this one here so we can keep kind of going in order. I'll have more videos coming up though. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for supporting my new channel so much. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I'm really flattered that people are interested. So I'll see you guys again later. Bye.